One of the more unanimously agreed upon issues with Mario Kart World, beside the character selection screen, has got to be the character unlock system. Basically, in order to unlock the NPC racers, you have to be afflicted by the Kamek item, which sees you transform into an otherwise non-playable character, seemingly at random. I think it's been confirmed that certain regions increase the odds that you'll be transformed into a certain character, but that's besides the point. I'm also going to be referring to the NPC drivers as party characters or PCs because most of them could act as party members in a Paper Mario game, and using the terms enemy, side character, or playable NPC fail to encompass the variety of characters you play as or contradict themselves. None of these characters are NPCs because they're all playable. Enemies like piranha plants aren't side characters because they're the most common enemy in the series, with either it or one of its variations appearing more often as enemies in games than Mario himself appears playable. You can have a piranha plant and no Mario, but you can't have Mario with no piranha plant. 80s arcade cabinets notwithstanding. Characters like Piantas aren't enemies and are too humanoid to classify as creature. Likewise, the Dolphin is a creature, but it's not an enemy. The most common name I've seen for these characters has been NPC character, which is not only an oxymoron, but is also redundant, so I'm not using that. Anyway, what would otherwise be viewed as a fun way to unlock characters has become a real sticking point for most people. I've seen videos and posts of players grinding for a specific character for hours just for them to not get the one they're looking for by the end, and it's gotten to the point where most consider this to be a legitimate flaw with the game. And while I can understand that conclusion to a degree, this is one of the very few occasions where I'd say players are acting entitled. I know the word entitled may be one of the most divisive words you can use on the internet, but what I mean by entitled is refusing to engage with the game on its own terms and expecting it to appeal to your own taste to an unreasonable level, which makes me question whether you even enjoy the game that much to begin with. What I thought people enjoyed about Nintendo games was being able to pay a set price and enjoy everything the game has to offer, but where the entitlement comes in is when you want every little thing in the game to be handed to you on a silver platter, which is something I disagree with. Now, while I like the concept and execution of this item, there's a very important factor which makes this system more egregious than it really should be, but I'm really in the mood to make a bad faith argument to contrive discussion, so that's what I'm gonna do. Once upon a time, you actually had to play games to unlock things, whether that be characters, stages, cars, you name it. If you played the game, you could unlock it. No grinding, no microtransactions, no season passes, play the game, unlock the reward. Unfortunately, we live in an age where marketing often spoils any sense of discovery a game could have in order to build hype, so many players go into games with the mindset that they're going to do the thing they saw in the trailer despite that thing being a late game feature, often resulting in players rushing through the majority of the game just to get to the one section they saw. On the other hand, with the ability to remotely modify games, developers have been replacing unlocks with content updates, and the social aspect that comes with it naturally lets players show off the various characters and skins they've unlocked, or more often than not purchased, resulting in a have and have-nots community of envy for those who have what others desire. Playing as a crab is perfectly fine until you see that someone else is playing as a cataquack, then all of a sudden, the crab isn't enough anymore, and the game becomes worse until you have what other players have. But without the internet, you wouldn't even know that you could play as the cataquack, and you might assume that it's an NPC-only driver, as was often the case back then. This isn't helped by the trend of games psychologically exploiting people's sense of accomplishment by showering players with superfluous fluff to falsify a sense of progress, so after years of conditioning, when a player is faced with a game that doesn't do this, the game may feel unrewarding to play. I mean, some people consider a game dead if it isn't receiving constant updates, and some will even refuse to play a game if it's not constantly getting new content. And while I'd usually scoff at that notion, that pattern of reasoning sounds too much like an undiagnosed mental illness for me to point at and ridicule, so I'll just reserve my comments for now. When it comes to games with good unlock rewards, very few have been able to deliver a sense of excitement quite as well as Smash Bros, specifically Melee and Brawl. And while nostalgia definitely plays a factor in this, even games from that era, which I have no nostalgic attachment to, still execute their unlock system better than most games do now, but just using Smash as an example, from my own experience, before I unlocked Luigi in either game, I often played as Green Mario until I unlocked him because I prefer the character just that much. But that doesn't mean I couldn't enjoy the game up until that point, and I definitely didn't see the unlock process as a flaw. Plus, that led me to experiment with characters and modes that I otherwise wouldn't have even tried, which I can only see as a good thing. On top of that, I didn't know how many total characters were in either game, and because my goal was to have fun and not necessarily to fill out the roster, whenever I actually unlocked something new, it was more so a surprise than anything else. The only time I can recall feeling any sort of envy is whenever I couldn't unlock Sonic and Brawl normally, so I had to beat the entire Subspace Emissary first. But like, oh no? I have to play the entire Subspace Emissary? Are you kidding? By the time I even got to Sonic, I was like, oh wait, that's why I started playing this. Because the game was just inherently enjoyable. And speaking of Sonic, somehow this perfectly segues into my next point about player expectations. Basically, the majority of complaints leveled against Sonic games is that they don't play like the classics or they don't play like Mario. But that's the equivalent of biting into a chili dog and expecting it to taste like pasta. If you accept a game for what it is and don't try to fit it into a Mario-shaped mold, you'll actually be able to meet the game on its own terms and appreciate what it does rather than what it doesn't do, which is my approach to most games. If the game deserves it, that is. How this relates to Mario Kart World is that once you understand that a certain part of a game is designed in a way you don't like, you can still try to enjoy other aspects of the game instead of hyperfixating on the negatives. And there's something to be said about how hinging your enjoyment of a game on a dice roll is just a recipe for disaster. From what I can tell, unlocking the PCs in Mario Kart World is supposed to be like one of those urban legend things that has an extremely rare chance of happening that most players just stumble across, as opposed to being something you actively search for. Actually, remember that Brawl game I was talking about earlier? Complete trash, literally unplayable. Why? Because I haven't gotten a chance to see Manaphy. You see, in Brawl, there's a 1 in 493 chance of seeing this Pokemon, and the only way to see its effects is for two opponents to be very close to it, in the Smash Bros game that was played competitively the least right after 3DS, meaning that most players that even got to see this Pokemon aren't going to be playing on a small stage and likely won't even be able to see its effects. If my enjoyment of the game as a whole hinged on seeing Manaphy, then I'd probably despise Brawl, but since it doesn't, I can appreciate everything else the game does. So we have two games, both with items, some of which are rare, whose effects are even rarer to see, but why does Manaphy succeed where Kamek fails? Well, do you remember that important factor I spoke about earlier that makes the unlock system so egregious in the first place? You see, the thing about unlockables is that they were traditionally a reward for playing the game to supplement a complete experience, not to provide the complete experience itself. But as someone who doesn't own Mario Kart World, I just have to ask, aren't there any other features you can be focusing on, like an adventure mode, stunt race, score attack, boss battles, quests, deliveries? Surely you can focus on those aspects of the game instead of the fact you can't play as a character you like. If I enjoy a game, or if I want to enjoy a game, I'm willing to meet the developers on their terms, even if they are convoluted. I mean, I'm playing their game with their rules, though I'll admit that with a series like Mario Kart there is a certain baseline expectation, so I'm a bit less forgiving of certain things. And while Mario Kart World is divisive and has problems, the character unlock system isn't one of them. That is, unless the game lacks anything to do that's worthwhile beyond unlocking characters. Most good games I've played boast a variety of unlockables beyond just characters, like stages, achievements, difficulty settings, and even entire modes, and mini-games with even more modes within those mini-games. Mario Kart World boasts no such unlockables and offers very little beyond the open world. Honestly, at this point, I don't even mind the $80 price tag as much as I do the people defending it. People have this obsession with games being quote-unquote focused, and they think any deviation from the core gameplay is a detriment. But of course, this line of reasoning only arises if the execution of said deviation isn't received well. This might be news to you, but the best received open world sandbox games are often the greatest antithesis to a focus game. The whole point of an open world is to fill it with small challenges to break up the exploration gameplay, not only to incentivize and reward said exploration, but also to keep things from getting too repetitive. This is known as gameplay variety, but only if you like the game. But if you don't like the game, then we call this being unfocused. Keep an ear out when YouTubers use the word unfocused when talking about a game. Chances are that the word never comes up when they like the deviations, but if it's a game they do like, then they'll say it has a lot of gameplay variety. Once you notice this double standard, you'll never unnotice it. As someone who has issues focusing, or is it impatience? Well, it could also be compulsiveness. I find it ironic how an activity notoriously enjoyed by people with the shortest attention spans complain the loudest when their hobby decides to be as focused as they are. Mario Kart World just might be the most focused open world game ever released, and is to the game's absolute detriment. I'm not saying that the game needs to have a fishing minigame, but challenges that test a particular skill set and uncover more of the world's history would only serve to benefit the game. Also, considering all the water that you can't drive under, a fishing minigame wouldn't hurt. And after looking at the community's thoughts on the admission, this is clearly a topic worth visiting again. I said it before and I'll say it again. Driving underwater would only improve the world exploration because it gives players more world to explore and the developers an opportunity to mess around with the kart physics. And before you finish typing that comment saying that the underwater driving was slow, I'd like to remind you that sequels aren't beholden to the same rules as a previous entry, hence why you drive on top of the water in the first place. Don't you think they could have sped up the underwater driving too? I like the speedy river sections they added to the game. Now imagine driving through underwater sections and being able to catch a ride on the currents. Pair that with the new wall riding mechanics and that could lead to some really sick level design. I also don't want to hear the nonsense excuse that Nintendo can't do it, because GTA 5 from 2013 had explorable underwater sections. A kart racer released in 2025 with nowhere close to as much world interactivity as a GTA game, and a focus on environmental exploration is the ideal candidate for a drivable sea floor. I've also seen people justify the lack of underwater sections with the excuse that it'd be difficult for Nintendo to implement the sections naturally, as if they can't make the explorable underwater sections calm and translucent like they did before. But no, there's no way that Mario features glider ramps and previously had zero gravity sections denoted by a glowing blue panel kart could possibly implement diving sections into their tracks. Nope, can't do it, no way. And it's also too bad that we didn't just give players more vertical control over their vehicles to allow them to resurface whenever they want during free roam. And speaking of the free roam, it's actually shocking how bare bones it is. The world is full of characters that do nothing but cheer from the sidelines and phase through vehicles. No dialogue, story, events, conflict, nothing. I know Mario games aren't known for their stories, but the problem with creating an open world but not fully committing to it is that you create a world that seems to be stuck in a time loop and is really creepy. Anyway, those are my updated thoughts on this whole situation. At this point, I've lost all hope in big releases from major game publishers, but honestly, we're pretty spoiled for choice on games to play already, so I'm going to be going through my backlog of games to play as well as revisiting some of my favorites, and I'm looking to start posting about those in addition to covering the gaming industry's nonsense. And I'm so sorry for not acknowledging it, but I still can't wrap my head around the fact that I've gotten over 2,000 subscribers, so honest and truly, thank you. That being said, I'm sure some of you are well aware of the fact that I respond to pretty much every comment, so after some careful consideration, I decided I'm going to step out of my comfort zone once again and try streaming for a bit. Maybe we'll do a fan game or a ROM hack or something. Those are always fun, right? But as always, if you enjoyed this video, then feel free to leave a like, comment your thoughts down below, and subscribe to see the next post as soon as it goes live. Alright, take care. Also, please stop factoring in the Mario Kart World bundle saying it's a $50 option. That's a FOMO tactic to create artificial scarcity and drive sales. The physical version is $80 and the standalone digital version will remain at $80 unless Nintendo does a price drop. Okay, love you, bye. What on earth was the ending to this video and why are over 2,000 people subscribed to this?